Okay, so I am going to go over how a bill becomes a law. This all comes from Article 1, Section 7. And we're going to make a little flow chart. For this, I'm going to use 2 pen colors. And what I'm going to do with the pen colors is I'm going to use the blue one to put the parts of the process that are explicitly in the Constitution. And then many procedures and customs have been added, so that's what will be in red pen. So our Constitution establishes a bicameral legislature. So there would be the House of Representatives, and there would be the Senate. And each chamber has different powers, unique features, but in the legislative process, they each have equal power in passing a law. So when a bill can be introduced in either chamber. A senator can propose a bill in the Senate, or a representative could propose a bill in the House. But before it goes to the president, it has to pass both chambers. So we'll put down here at the bottom the president. Okay. Now, a bill can start in either chamber. There's one exception to that rule, and it has to do with a revenue bill. So put a little asterisk here. Taxing bills, or revenue bill, must originate in the House. Must start here. And that shouldn't feel like memorization. The House of Representatives would be the more representative chamber, and after winning the Revolutionary War with the mantra, no taxation without representation, it would stand to reason that the framers would set up rules for how taxes are passed, and they would want to make sure that any taxing bill does start in the more representative chamber. The Senate still has to approve it for it to go to the president and become law. But here, just so we know, taxing bills have to originate here. It doesn't mean that the Senate is cut out of the process for these bills. So it doesn't really matter in what order, but the Constitution does designate that in order to pass the Senate, a simple majority is needed. So the Senate, the full Senate, when they're looking at a bill, they can do debate, and they vote, and you need a simple majority to pass. And a simple majority is 50% plus 1, so in the Senate that would be 51 senators. And so it can go into the Senate, be debated and voted on, and then after that it would have to still go to the House of Representatives. And the full House, which is 435 people, would have their debate, their vote, and like the other chamber, it's a simple majority to pass, which out of 435 would be 218 representatives. And then, if it passes through there, where would it go? Down to the president. But a bill could have started in another chamber in the House of Representatives, so I would like to do a dotted line just to demonstrate that there was this other possibility, that it could have been debated and voted on in the House first, and then it would go to the Senate. Debate and vote, and if it came out, it would go here. And the president has some options. If he signs it, what happens? It's a law. Now he can veto it. The word veto does not come up in Article 1, Section 7, but he, if he doesn't approve, he shall send it back, the bill back to the House in which it started with a list of objections. And so in those objections, he's going to say, here's what you need to change so that I might sign this. But the House and Senate, they know him. They have ways to find out if he would approve of something or not. So they're going to do their best to make sure they're sending him a bill he would actually pass. If he vetoes it, though, it is not a law, and all their hard work has gone to waste. But there is still an opportunity for Congress to override the veto. And Congress can override the veto when he sends his objections back, and if they don't just, tweak it to match with something that he would like, they can keep it as it is, and they can override his veto. But in order to do so, they need 2/3 vote in each chamber. So they can override the veto with a 2/3 vote in each chamber. So that would be 290 votes in the House and 67 in the Senate. So it's really hard to override a presidential veto. And people in Congress would try to send a bill that wouldn't be vetoed anyway. Focus. Okay. But the Constitution does acknowledge that there might be this other thing the president does. Suppose the president doesn't want to sign a bill into law, but knows if he vetoes it, it might get overridden. He can't just stall. Congress has worked hard on this. He can't just ignore it and sort of obstruct Congress from doing their job that way. So they put a 10-day time limit on it. So if 10 days pass, excluding Sundays, if 10 days pass and the president still hasn't done anything, really from there, there's two possibilities. If 10 days pass while Congress is waiting, they're waiting to see if he's going to veto it so they can look at the changes he'd like, or they could override his veto. If they're sitting there waiting for the president to sign it or veto it so that they can make a counteroffer, if 10 days pass, then it's automatically a law. And why would a president not sign a bill into law that's going to become a law anyway if he ignores it? Maybe he's out of the country and it's not that important of legislation, or perhaps he doesn't want his name on it. He doesn't want in the textbooks to be on that side of history. Now, let's suppose 10 days pass, but during those 10 days, Congress adjourned. Their legislative session ended, and they went home. Well, at that point, he has no one to send his objections to. So if after 5 days Congress goes home, and on the 6th day he wants to veto it, there's no one to send his objections to, so Congress can't override his veto. And that is called a pocket veto. And it's not a law then. So what gets tricky here is 10 days pass and he doesn't do anything. It's a law if Congress is still in session. It is not a law if Congress adjourned. So the moral of the story here is that if it's a really important bill, Congress needs to get it done in a timely manner to make sure that they have 10 days. Or they just need to stay longer. Okay. So what you have now in blue is roughly what's explicitly in the Constitution. But I want to now go back and add things that are part of the process. And in the Constitution, it does state that each chamber can make its own rules for how it conducts its proceedings. And it also says that each chamber can, pick its officers. So the House constitutionally does have a speaker, but the majority leader and the whips and other officers within the House, those are set up by custom. Same thing in the Senate. Technically, the president and the vice president are head of the Senate, but the senators themselves might choose other officers, which they have. But we'll talk about those another day. So when a bill comes in, there's 100 senators, 435 representatives, and 1,000 bills a year introduced. And there's only so many days in the year that they're even in session. So how to get all that business done? Can the entire Senate and the entire House look at every single bill and debate every single bill? Absolutely not. So we have a logistical problem of the full Senate debating and voting on every single bill that's introduced, and same thing in the House, especially the House, because there are more people there to debate. And not everyone's an expert on everything. So in an effort to divide up the workload and maybe be more efficient, plus have a little more expertise, senators have set up a committee system, so of the representatives in the House. And and even within a committee, there might be subcommittees. So depending on the nature of the bill, it'll go to the committee that's relevant to that. So, and then, and more specifically, probably to a subcommittee. So if there's a very specific subcommittee to deal with the bill, so maybe if it's a bill to that would give subsidies to tobacco farmers, well, it would go to the tobacco subcommittee. And then after that, it would go to the full committee, which would be the House or Senate Agricultural Committee. So these committees are comprised of senators from both parties, representatives from both parties. And the longer a senator or representative sits on a committee, the more of an expert they become in the topic. And so the subcommittee will do hearings, we'll do some research. So when they're looking at the bill, they're going to, they're going to try to investigate if it's a good bill, and maybe they make some revisions. But if after doing that, or even before doing that, if the subcommittee thinks, this is not such a great bill, it's not worth a vote, it's just not a good enough piece of legislation, they're not going to send it to the committee. They're going to table it, which essentially means that it gets neglected. And when the legislative session ends, it disappears. So they can report it out to committee. So if it makes it out and they think it's good enough, it'll go to committee. And then the committee might also make they might amend the bill. And all of this is behind closed doors. Amend, and if they look at it and decide, we're not going to fix it, it's not a good piece of legislation, they might not report it out. So most bills die here because the committees are the ones doing the research, and they're trying to save time and make sure any bill that does make it out of committee is really worth the full chamber's time. They can make revisions and stuff, but sometimes they'll decide it's not even worth revising. So before it goes all the way for debate, to keep this orderly, there's a schedule, there's a calendar. So in the Senate, it's really the leadership that controls that. Makes some of the rules for debate, when will vote be, and puts things on the calendar. And then over here, it's the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee does exactly what it sounds like. It makes rules for the debate. So perhaps here's the vote will happen on Thursday at noon. Up until then, everyone in the House can speak for 3 minutes at a time, no more than twice. And it is not, Section 3 is not up for amendment, meaning nobody can propose an amendment to Section 3. So the Rules Committee is really powerful because it determines not only if and when we're going to debate and vote on something, but how we debate and vote on something. So the Rules Committee is kind of like a traffic cop. It's going to help make things move fast, or at least faster, in the House, which it's totally needed because there's 435 people there, so there's going to have to be ground rules. And the leadership does sort of the same thing. Let's put schedules, debate, schedules, debate. And then it could go there. So if it actually makes it out of committee and goes to the full Senate or the full House, there you are. Need 51 to pass, you send it to the president. But notice here that the committees could make amendments, and even on the floor there could be some debate, vote, and changes. So what might happen is you have the Senate pass a bill, but when it went through the House it was changed. And what you end up with then is two different versions. So I'm going to do this one in black now. So you come out with version A, and then you come out with version B. Those are different. Which one goes to the president? Constitutionally, neither of them can go to the president, because if you send B, version B, to the president, it was not passed through the Senate. If you send version A to the president, it was never passed by the House. So we have to reconcile A and B so that they've both been approved by both chambers and send one version to the president. And that's when we have the conference committee. I'm sort of torn on if I should put this in red and blue. It's not mentioned, but this is a step that is needed to keep the legislative process constitutional. So I'm going to put it with like a blue and a red box. So the Constitution's not specific in this, but this is what keeps the whole process constitutional. And this would be a conference committee. The conference committee is a committee of people from both chambers. So some senators, some representatives. They come together and their job is to iron out the differences between these bills and come up with a compromise version. So they create compromise version of the bill. Now, this is, the conference committee does generally favor the Senate version, but they can tweak it. So now if they create a new bill that sort of compromises A and B, what we end up with is not A or B, but really version C. Now, version C has not been approved technically by the Senate or the House. It was approved by some senators and some representatives, but not the full chambers. So version C is chosen, and then it gets sort of, it goes fast-tracked back through the House, full House, through the full Senate, and then it goes to the president. So when it goes through this process, that happens simultaneously. But every other way, you know, it goes through one chamber at a time. Okay, so I think we have all the basic pieces here. Of course, we will elaborate and go into more detail about how the political parties control this system. All right, that's it.